Today we're heading out on an exciting journey where we'll explore what actually counts as life. Have you ever wondered what makes a flower, an animal, or even you yourself alive? And how do living things differ from things that aren't alive, like rocks or water? We will also look at how scientists divide all living things into different groups and why they do that. In addition, we'll talk about cells, the tiny, invisible building blocks that all living beings are made of. Do you know where all life on Earth is found? It exists within an area called the biosphere, Biosfären in Swedish. The biosphere is like a thin shell around the Earth where all life exists. It extends about 10 kilometers down into the ocean and about 10 kilometers up into the air. Even though this layer is quite thin compared to the size of the whole planet, it's incredibly important because this is where all living beings live, from the smallest bacteria to the largest whales. When we talk about different animals and plants, we often use the word species, art in Swedish. But what does it actually mean? A species is a group of organisms that can mate with one another and produce offspring. And those offspring can in turn also have their own offspring. This means that if two animals are of the same species, they can have young that grow up and continue to spread the species. One example is that all dogs, regardless of breed, are the same species because they can have puppies together. Sometimes two different species mate, and then they produce a mix of the two species called a hybrid in Swedish. A well-known example of a hybrid is the mule, which is a mix between a horse and a donkey. But there's something special about hybrids. They cannot have offspring. That means that even if they live and grow, they cannot pass their genes on to the next generation. You might wonder, if a Chihuahua and a Great Dane look so different, are they really the same species? The answer is yes. Within a species, there can be great variation in appearance, and for our domestic animals, these variations are called breeds, razor in Swedish. Even though a Chihuahua is small and a Great Dane is large, they can still have puppies together because they are both dogs and therefore belong to the same species. The world is full of different animals and plants, so how do scientists keep track of them all? Biologists have identified over 1.5 million species, but there are probably many more, perhaps over 10 million. To organize all these species, scientists such as Carl Linnaeus developed a system in which each species gets a scientific name. These names are usually in Latin or Greek, and they help scientists all over the world communicate about exactly the same species, even if they speak different languages. To understand and study all living organisms, we have to group them in different ways, a process called classification. By looking at similarities and differences in appearance and other traits, scientists can group organisms into large categories, such as animals, plants, and fungi. They can then keep subdividing these categories into smaller and smaller groups until we end up at the specific species. In this way, we can create order among all the different living beings. Now we come to the big question. What is life, really? For something to count as living, it has to meet certain criteria that scientists have agreed upon. These criteria help us distinguish living things from non-living things. We'll soon go through these criteria so that we can understand what truly separates a living thing, like a tree or a cat, from a non-living thing, like a stone or a computer. For something to be classified as living, it must meet several important criteria. First and foremost, it must consist of one or more cells. It must also be able to reproduce, meaning it can create new versions of itself. In addition, it must have hereditary material, genetic instructions that are passed on to the next generation. Living things must also be able to take up nutrients from their surroundings in order to grow and gain energy. They need energy to survive. And they also release substances into the environment. living beings have the ability to move in some way and to respond to their surroundings, for example, by changing their behavior when something changes. Finally, they must be able to adapt and evolve over time. All of these together allow us to say that something is alive. Now that we're approaching the end of this video, you can look at the list here on the left. It contains important points you need to understand. You should know what a species is and how scientists classify different organisms. It's important to understand what a hybrid is and why hybrids cannot have offspring. You also need to know what is required for something to count as living, such as consisting of cells and being able to reproduce. If anything feels unclear, you can always watch the video again. Also, make sure you understand the terms we have talked about. The terms are translated in the video description, so check there to be sure you've got everything. Thanks for watching, and if you want to see the next video, you can click above.